Christmas Day, there were a lot of expectations around what was going to happen between the NFL and the NBA. And what we all know, right, just based on past precedent, is that the NBA was going to blow, or the NFL was going to blow the NBA out of the water. Like, we all knew it, right? The NFL is the big show in town. It is the behemoth in American sports. There is no league in this country that can compete with the NFL. It's an exercise in futility to even try. The real question was, all right, both games were on Netflix. How was Nielsen going to rate it? How was Nielsen going to figure out the amount of viewers? Was it going to just be shared data between Netflix and Nielsen? But we ended up getting the answer, and it pretty much confirmed what we imagined. So between the NFL and the NBA, the NFL averaged around 24 million viewers across both games. It peaked with 27 million in the Ravens-Texans game when Beyonce performed at halftime. But Chiefs-Steelers averaged 24.1 million viewers. Ravens-Texans was actually up a little bit, due in large part to the halftime show, 24.3 million viewers. Now, as we've discussed in the past on this show, the NBA for the longest time had a monopoly on Christmas. It was their thing. It was their big tentpole event. It was the day that everyone just got used to the 5 back-to-back games, and basketball and Christmas were synonymous with one another. And then the NFL said, oh, that seems like a good time to take over another holiday. Thanksgiving's not enough. Let's go get Christmas too. And so the NFL last year blew the NBA out of the water. They had 3 games. This year they went down to 2. And a lot of people, a lot of football fans were left wondering, like, why wasn't there a primetime game? That seems weird. Here's the breakdown on the NBA ratings, and we're going to talk about a little bit of misleading data that came out of Christmas Day. Knicks Spurs was the noon tip-off. That was 4.9 viewers, or 4.9 million on average. Celtics Sixers was up a little bit, 5.1 million viewers on average. Timberwolves Mavericks dipped, 4.3 million on average. Lakers Warriors jumped up in a big way, 7.7 million viewers. And then the final game of the night, which I think had about a 10:30 tip-off, was Nuggets Suns, 3.8 million viewers. Here's the thing. The NBA then ran out, and ESPN ran out, and they touted the fact that viewership on Christmas Day was up. I think they said 84% year over year. What they failed to point out is 2 things. Last year, the primetime game was Sixers Heat. That was on ESPN only, not ABC. The NBA did a very smart thing this year, and ESPN. They did a smart thing. The NBA said, we're going to have these games on ESPN and ABC. Why? ABC is available in far more homes than the cable network ESPN is. You could practically guarantee yourself an extra 500,000, million, maybe even 2 million viewers on aggregate just because of how readily available ABC is. You don't need to have cable. If you're still an antenna viewer, you can still get it. If you're a cord cutter, in a lot of cases, you can still find ABC even without having to pay for like a YouTube TV or a Hulu Plus. Like, it's there, okay? So, slightly misleading, because it was ESPN versus ESPN and ABC year over year. And the other very misleading part of it is that they held off that Lakers-Warriors game for the primetime slot, but what wasn't happening at the same time? The NFL. Because the NFL ran 2 games. One was around noon, one was around 4. They didn't run head-to-head. The primetime game last year, Sixers Heat, I think it was Sixers Heat last year. That game ran up against another NFL game, and again, was only on ESPN. This year, they had Warriors-Lakers on ESPN and ABC, no opposition from football. So they did something where they tried to make it look like the numbers were up significantly, because in theory and in actuality, they were, but context is pretty important here. And the NFL wasn't running a 3rd game. If they had, it would have blown the NBA out of the water. And this is from somebody who loves basketball and will happily sit down and watch any matchup, practically, put a little caveat, practically any NBA game that's on Christmas, because it's a tradition. Now, did I go back and forth between the NBA and the NBA, or the NFL and NBA? I did, right? Like, I started with the games on Netflix. I saw that the Chiefs game was going to end up being a blowout, so we flipped on to the NBA at halftime. We kept it there. We came back for like the fourth quarter, saw that it was still going to be a lopsided game. The Steelers had no chance to come back. We went back to the NBA. We watched the Sixers game in its entirety. We had a second screen up for a little bit for the Texans-Ravens game, but I just kind of knew that with Tank Dell going out with his knee going kablam last week, tore 3 ligaments in his knee. The Texans weren't going to look particularly good. They were probably going to look deflated and come out flat. They did. It was a blowout. They put up 2 points on Christmas Day. Now, if you want to make the argument that it's silly to look at ratings because the NBA games were better overall and were more competitive overall, you could certainly do that. And I will now welcome people into the kind of nonsense and the nonsensical discourse that's had about ratings. Do ratings affect your experience as a viewer? If you're a basketball fan, does the fact that the NBA got like 5x'd by the NFL in some games, does that affect your ability to enjoy the NBA on Christmas? The answer is probably no. If you're somebody who sits back and says, you know what, the thing that I care about the most is the ratings. I can't enjoy anything unless the ratings are in line with what I think I saw. That's a problem. I say this because in pro wrestling, there's always this, AEW had a down show, the rating was low. That means it sucked. Not necessarily. It could still be a really good show. It just means that people aren't watching. Cable is down. We heard this with the NBA this year. The cable subscriber base is down. There are more cord cutters. Those numbers have gone down. There we go. I was frozen for a second. Oh, that was almost bad. We can't have that. No freezing today. Okay. But it shouldn't affect how you feel as a sports fan. It really shouldn't. And if you're a huge football fan, whether they had 24 million on average or they had 10 million on average, it shouldn't affect whether or not you enjoyed the football. Now, in fairness, the NFL games really weren't that close. The Steelers game was somewhat close, at least early, but it fell apart. And the second game, Ravens-Texans, was never even remotely close. So if you're going for competitiveness, even if you don't like the NBA product, the NBA games were more competitive. And that Sixers-Celtics game that popped the biggest number of the 3 earlier games that ran head-to-head with the NFL, that game was fantastic.